Welcome back, traders and investors. Our third and final guest today is David Smith, and he is a fan of the Bitcoin in the cryptocurrency revolution. David, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you guys?
We're doing good. We're doing good here at Benzinga World Headquarters. So you turned $10,000 into 193,000 in 4 months. Now I see you say, although things have come down a bit since then, I hope you're using some good risk reward ratios.
Yeah, it's Bitcoin's a wild ride. It's kind of like being into Facebook right when Zuckerberg started in his dorm room. You can imagine that the value on Facebook would have fluctuated a whole lot if you were in that early, and that's the same kind of volatility that we're seeing here with Bitcoin.
Okay, it's been kind of quiet a little bit, and you had some problems with just some exchanges. You've had some fallout from that. Could you just give us a quick recap of the price history, and let's say over the last few months here where it was in the news quite a bit.
Sure. So last year was really when it broke out into the mainstream public. You started seeing a lot of news when it was, I think in April, May, when it started hitting the 240 mark, when in January it started out around $15. So that was when people who got in early, when they bought Bitcoins for 9 cents a coin, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and they bought thousands of them, all of a sudden these people had multi-million dollar portfolios. There was a guy in Norway, he put in like $27, and over 3 years, that $27 appreciated to like 800,000, and today it'd probably be around $3 million worth. So when you see those kinds of jumps, that really got people interested. So last year, right around May, it hit around 240, and then it dropped off. It went down to like 70, maybe over a couple weeks, maybe a month, and then it kind of stayed around the 70 to 100 range until October. And then in October and November, it went from about 100 to about 1100.
Wow.
And that was when China really started getting involved. Yeah, and so that's when you can see how you put in a small amount of money, and then all of a sudden it just explodes. I just never been in any asset that had moved that fast. And then as it had went up at the end of November, it went from 100 to about 1100. Then right in December, it started coming right back down. And that was because there'd been a lot of enthusiasm in November about China, and then the Chinese started cracking down on it.
And
And that's continued up through just last week. China's been cracking down on it, cracking down on it, cracking down on it, and that's been putting downward pressure on the price. There've been big drops. And the other thing you mentioned was the securities, or the exchanges, and the security there. Um, there was one exchange that used to be the largest. It was the mainstay. It was one everyone was quoting for prices. And last month they announced that they had no money. They had nobody's bitcoins. And so at the time that was like 6% of all the bitcoins in existence. And the community was really shocked. Not that there were problems there, because in Bitcoin there's different markets, and there had been since last May, there's been a different price for this particular market, the Mt. Gox market,
correct. Yep.
compared to the other markets. So people were thinking, something's fishy over there, something's not right, but I don't think anyone expected it to be announced that, we have no money. I think it was more like people thought, oh, maybe it's like 10% low or something like that. It was just a real shock to the community. And when that happened, the price went from about 800 down into like the 400 range, bounced back up to 600, and then this China pressure has been put it back down into last week it was at 350, but it's starting to recover from that. It's in almost at 500 now. I was at 515 a little bit earlier this morning.
Okay, and by cracking down, what do you mean by China's cracking down?
So in November, well, last year there's like this the government's involved in the news over in China, so they had been issuing some positive reports on Bitcoin, and so that was why people were thinking, well, actually in November, the majority of the Bitcoin volume was all over in China, and not in the U.S. And the Chinese were the ones that were buying most of the Bitcoins, and then the Chinese government started making it harder for the citizens to use the exchanges and things like that. And so over the past 4 months, there have been continuing rumors of things getting tighter and harder for these exchanges to do business
Okay, and
with the
what's
Chinese
what's your
customers.
outlook now? So you've had, I mean, this thing started out very low price, had to blow off top. I believe 1100. You said you pulled all the way back now. So do you think that that was just, a healthy retracement in a longer term uptrend?
I think it's a lot of people that saw the price go up and they thought, hey, I'm going to hop in here, I'm going to make a quick buck. And maybe they bought in at 1,000, and then they watched the thing go down to 800 or 600, and they're like, whoa, I wanted to make money, not lose money. And so then I think a lot of these people were hopping out, and I think they're making a big mistake because last year Bitcoin was in a completely different place. Like 1 year in Bitcoin is maybe like 10 years in the rest of the world. There have been so many positive changes and announcements in the Bitcoin space, and it's really brought out a lot of the risk. Last year people were wondering, if the U.S. was going to take a negative stance and make it illegal, but there were Senate hearings in November, and the U.S. has taken a pretty positive stance and said, hey, we're gonna look at this, and we want to get exchanges here in the U.S. licensed and regulated. The VC firms just started hopping in. Last year, I think they made maybe $100 million investment, and this year they're projected to make $300 million in investment. And the Wall Street firms are starting to look at it now. There was a conference a couple weeks ago that was accepting a Wall Street conference, and they were accepting payment in Bitcoin. So those guys are all looking at this and saying, how big can it get?
Yeah,
And when you look at the market for Bitcoin, it's the whole world. It's every single person, every single business, every financial transaction. That's the total addressable market. And there's never been an asset like that in history. Well, maybe something like gold. And that's something that Bitcoin gets compared to a lot is gold. Cause on Bitcoin there's a fixed amount of these units that will ever exist,
so
and so that gets people really
what's your
excited.
long term target? What's your long term target here for Bitcoin?
It's interesting because when I initially got in, I was looking to make 100x on my money in 2 to 5 years, and then after being in for just a few months, I was like, oh, yeah, I might hit my 100x next year, and then do I want to get out? And I'm still kind of struggling with that, and because now I'm thinking, well, hey, this does, when I first got in, it seemed just kind of like more of a speculative bet, but now with things looking so positive for it, I'm thinking, maybe I will stay in, or maybe I'll pull out some but keep some in, something along that, like how you were talking about that risk management.
Correct. So you didn't sell anything when it made that parabolic move up to 1100 then.
Nope, nope. Actually, I really thought about it. In November, I was getting really stressed out and thinking, hey, this thing went up so fast, and should I really just dump it? But I really thought about, the value proposition, and I got centered and decided to stay in. And then on these recent dips, I've actually bought some more. So I think that's been a good opportunity for people to buy in at low prices. Because last year, I didn't think we'd ever see these prices again.
Right, and I think I read somewhere that some Wall Street firm or a big manager, someone a pretty conservative manager. I wish I can remember the quote that he had on Bitcoin, but that he said that he was looking at investing in it. So, I mean, you're talking
Yeah, I think that
about
was probably Bill Mason. I think he's a value
yeah,
investor.
that's who it was. Excellent.
Yeah, so he's
Yes.
looking at it today, and he's saying, the market cap's like 6 billion, and the potential market cap is, maybe the 50, $100 trillion range, something like that.
So do you use? I mean, besides using it, for an investment vehicle, I mean, do you? Are you using it for purchases or anything, I think that's the thing that people like really, a dollar is a dollar, and you can go into a store here and purchase something now. I think really for Bitcoin to take off, it has to be a usable currency. I mean, do you use it? Are you using it just as an investment, or are you using it to actually, as an exchange?
I did use it some last year. I don't think I've bought anything this year. I've given some to some people. I think last year I probably spent about $1,000. And like you were saying, I was just spending it to support businesses that take it. I have switched a couple companies that if they support Bitcoin, I will use them instead. But I might pay in U.S. dollars because, like you said, last year I would spend my Bitcoins, but then I would go and rebuy them to keep the same level.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. For Bitcoin to be successful, it needs to be a medium of exchange to reach its full potential. It can also be a store of value, and maybe then it wouldn't be used so much for exchange. But it's probably going to end up being a medium of exchange, used over the internet. It's really a fantastic use case for it.
Okay, and is it? Do you see this putting a lot of? I mean, the dollar obviously has been in trouble. Do you put seeing this put continued pressure on the dollar and the other currencies?
Oh, I don't think it's anywhere near competing with the dollar today. But maybe somewhere in like a place that has high inflation, like Argentina or Venezuela. If I was in those countries, I guess I'm not really sure what I'd be doing with my wealth. I've heard people buy cars, buy gold. Bitcoin could be pretty interesting to buy Bitcoins, and then you could invest in real estate or whatever anywhere around the world. Because after you get into Bitcoin, you can be anywhere instantly. The other area that's interesting too is in Africa. They for phones, they skipped landlines and they just went straight to cell phones. And actually, they're using this tool called M-Pesa to do a lot of their person-to-person payments and to pay for services. And so that's another place that Bitcoin could take off because it can come in with lower fees and give people more control over their money. And so they might just skip
Okay, what
maybe
about
credit cards and banks and things like that and go
what?
straight to Bitcoin.
Good question coming out of the chat room here from Rock and Haley here. What about taxes? I mean, are you? I mean, obviously you've bought and sold some, so you've realized a capital gain on the transaction. How do you treat it on your tax return?
Yeah, so that was another thing that was interesting too. So the IRS came out with some clarification on the rules specific to Bitcoin maybe a week or two ago, and people took that as negative news. I think a lot of Bitcoiners surprisingly thought that they were going to be off scot-free because the IRS hadn't said anything about Bitcoin. But I was always in it with the understanding that it would be taxed, and so I am going to pay taxes on my Bitcoins, and yeah, it will be treated as property for me.
Okay, and just to finish things up here, tell us about your product on MarketFi. We have some people in the chat room. They're interested in learning more about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency revolution. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your product?
Sure, it's a product that's near and dear to my heart. I spend a lot of my time every day reading and learning about Bitcoin, and so I like to share out on the product key nuggets. Usually, it won't be more than one article a day that I think will have an impact on the price. Like yesterday, Facebook announced, or there was news that Facebook
Correct.
was getting licensing for money transmission in Europe and looking to get into the remittance space. And so I talked about the impact that I thought that would have on the Bitcoin price when that comes to fruition.
Okay.
You
All
know, I was
right.
saying, I think.
No,
Oh,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. No, just I mean, is that obviously you believe that's bullish for Bitcoin then, correct?
I think in the short term, so I think as soon as that news hits, it's going to be negative for Bitcoin because that's a direct competition to Bitcoin,
Okay.
and I think they'll have a little bit of a first mover advantage. But then I could see a PayPal or Western Union or something like that to compete back with Facebook, going and using Bitcoin and providing a better user experience and lower fees by using Bitcoin. So I do think long term it's bullish.
Okay, we've had David Smith on from has a product on MarketFi on Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency revolution. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please sign on to MarketFi and take a look. David, thanks a lot. We will keep an eye on the currency here and its fluctuations, and I'd like to have you back on again.
Thanks, guys. It's been fun.
Okay, thanks, David.